today's meeting is very important. We are in the middle of summer and we have a lot of issues on the agenda that requires us to have a full and frank discussions and look forward to some very important projects that are in the work for the access to justice community. And but before we do anything at all, in the last 6 or 9 months, or maybe 6 months, I believe Esperanza Boboa, Terry Price, and a number of, Judge Dave Keenan were part of the recruitment process that went ahead and interviewed a lot of our community members and every applicant for the Access to Justice Board. We are happy to report that we have more BIPOC members apply to join the board because of the effort of the recruitment committee and as well as the community advisory panel than we have ever had in the past. A lot of candidates applied from the BIPOC community, and we are happy to report that the recruitment process went well and the Supreme Court, I believe, have approved all the recommendations. And I will let Esperanza Boboa go ahead and introduce the new members that are joining the Access to Justice Board.
Yes, thank you, Francis, very much. We have several members. Well, we have one member that's with us today, and I'm actually looking up, excuse me just a second. I was hoping that our other members would have, well, Bryn is here, great. Thank you for being here. And let's see, Vanna is not here, correct?
No, Vanna is here.
She is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there she is. I didn't see her. Okay. So it was a long process, as Francis said, but I will leave this time for our new board members to say a little bit, and Carnissa and Vanna had an opportunity to do a little bit of that just earlier in our working session. And Bryn, what we'd like to do is have the three of you just say briefly your names, where you're geographically located, what it is that you do, and why you decided that you wanted to be on the Access to Justice Board. Okay, so Bryn, why don't you go ahead and start?
Good morning. My name is Bryn Felix. Pardon me, I'm kind of getting over a cold at the moment. I'm based in Bremerton, Washington. I serve as general counsel at Peninsula Community Health Services. We're a federally qualified health center with clinics throughout Kitsap Mason and rural Pierce County. And I was thrilled to apply to the Access to Justice Board because the work that you do is just inspiring and important. And I'm currently developing a medical legal partnership at PCHS to create new community-based access points, and wanted to really connect that work to the work that the board is doing. So thank you for letting me join and contribute, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
And likewise, we look forward to working with you as well. Carnissa, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry, excuse me. Sure. My name is Carnissa Lucas Smith. I'm located in Seattle, Washington. I am a public defender at the Defenders Association in the Family Defense Unit. And the reason I wanted to be involved in the Access to Justice Board is I really wanted to find a place where I could volunteer and do some outreach outside of my work. And so the Access to Justice Board really seemed to align with what I wanted to do. And the work here is just really inspiring as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And Vanna, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Vanna Singh. I am from Pierce County, Washington, and I represent the Southeast Asian community, Khmer, Thai, and Laos. I am a community advocate for social justice, and I am passionate about this work because my people is marginalized and oppressed systemically and internally. So I want to find a great place where I can make an impact by showing up authentic and genuine. And thank you so much for selecting me. I look forward to working with you guys and moving the needle with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had a fourth candidate, Jane Smith, who I don't see her on here. If she is, just let me know. But we're really fortunate to have her as well. And thank you, Terry, for posting in the chat that Michelle Lucas was also part of that very key part of that committee recruitment. And so I wanted to make sure that folks knew that, and Michelle, that you got that recognition because you worked just as hard as everybody in that group. Anyway, thank you very much. And we're really excited to have you all on board. Looking forward to working with you. Let's go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Michelle, forgive me. Jane Smith.
Being recorded.
Thank you. Jane Smith is Okay. Jane Smith is a tribal member up in Stevens County, and she's been involved in access to justice issues previously. She's going to be with us hopefully next month, and you get to meet with her, but she's wonderful and marvelous person. And
thank you, Francis. Thank you. I completely love it. And she's an elder. So yes, we're very, very excited to have an elder from the res to be represented here.
All right. Thank you. Like I said, we are so excited about the members of the board. Now, May minutes, Access to Justice Board members, you have been provided with a copy of the minutes of last month's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the, thank you, Terry, too.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye. Okay, unanimously adopted. May minute is adopted. We move on to my friend is presenting today to the Access to Justice Board, Patrick Palace, which we all know and love. He presented this topic at the Board of Governors meeting. And I said, would you go to talk? Because most of the issues that he was talking about has to do with access to justice. And I said, you got to come and say this to the community and let them hear this from you. And so we all love Patrick, and he needs no introduction. So please go ahead, Patrick.
Well, thank you very much for that. And may I say, what a pleasure it is to be in front of you today and have this chance to have a conversation. So many friends that I've known over the years, and I have such great respect for the work that you do. Francis, thank you for the invitation to be here. So this is a presentation that I put together for the Western States Bar Conference, which is the all of the state leadership for all of the Western states. Sal can tell you all about that. He was the president of the Western States Bar Conference after he was the president of the Washington State Bar. I continue to go to these meetings, and we're fortunate to have Francis there along with a number of other members of our Board of Governors, which is great because it gives everyone a chance to see a broader sense of what's happening in leadership, in policies, in direction for state bars across the country. So I was tasked with saying or presenting with what COVID has done and how the legal profession is surviving COVID. So I'm going to give you a relatively short, it's about 10 minutes, maybe 15, presentation, kind of an overview of where we've been and where we're going, and maybe some takeaways about what COVID means. Yes, to the access justice community, and yes, to lawyers across this country in general. So if I have the ability to share screens, I will share screens. All right, can everyone see that all right? Okay, then we're off and running. So I think we all know that COVID has had a rather significant effect on all of us. And there's been kind of a vacuum in data. I think lawyers and the legal industry has been trying to understand what exactly COVID has done to us as an industry. There's a lot of data has been needed. I think we've all needed it as practitioners. We've needed that as an access to justice community. It helps us set priorities. It helps us set standards. It helps us anticipate where it is that we're going. And so I put this together. And one of the points to this too is this very point. Never let a good crisis go to waste. There are silver linings in everything. And I think COVID has really given us a huge silver lining in the legal profession for a number of reasons. And I'll walk through those. So in November, December of 2020, I wrote an article for GP Solo magazine, which is the solo and small practice section of the American Bar Association. And they asked me what were the 10 predictions that I had for what was going to happen with COVID. I don't have time to go through all 10, but I want to drill into a couple of things that I thought was going to happen and then talk about what actually happened. You can see this. We have an entire magazine on just COVID and the law, which was fun to put together. And I think a lot of it is still relevant today. So let's talk just a minute about where we've been, and then we'll move towards where we're going. So where have we been? COVID cases in the US, over 82 million. Deaths, over 1 million. Unemployment in 2020 was at 15%. On August 21st in 2020, the biggest single layoff or job firing or I quit my job day in the history of the United States. 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs on one single day. It was the worst day of COVID for the economy. For lawyers, we ended up having a big drop in cases in 2020 from March to June. Big drops. You can see from this slide. Firms, some saw closures. There was a shortfall in monthly revenue. And lawyers were bringing in less month over month than they had compared to previous years. And this is kind of a sense for what that looked like. There was also a change in billing. Billing volumes dropped dramatically and matter volumes dropped dramatically. And then they started to pick up at the end of 2020, and then they crashed again. And we don't have the current stats where we are, but it went down, down, down slowly. And I think it's flattening out. We'll get more stats this year and we'll know a little bit better. 77% of law firms agree their day-to-day operations have been significantly impacted. And that was a survey that was taken in 2020. Oddly, 16% said, no, it hasn't. COVID didn't affect my practice. I'm pretty sure those 16% would change their minds today. We also saw a big divide between what consumers thought about us and how we see ourselves. Consumers were ready for tech, but lawyers weren't seen as being tech savvy or able to provide technology at all. And that divide is rather significant. And when you look at stats like this, right? So on the left side is perception of lawyers. Clients, 26% thought that we could meet with clients virtually. So most people said lawyers can't meet with me virtually. You have to go into their offices like doctors. Lawyers, 83% of us said, sure, we can. We can do this by Zoom. And so this divide between consumer perception and lawyer perception showed quite a huge divide as we headed into COVID, or in the middle of COVID. So let's start with that background with a little bit of the predictions about where we thought we were going and where we ended up. So the first one is this. I know it seems like a bit of a no-brainer, but when I wrote this in 2020, it was a bit of a shocker for some. We're going to go remote, people. All right. Cut to the chase. We all went remote. There was some rather dramatic changes that went on. I like this slide. I sent this to my office as kind of a joke when I sent them all packing home. But the expansion of Zoom was dramatic. They had a growth of 354%. They went from 1 billion to 2 trillion users in 3 months as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that happened almost overnight. Second predictions, clients never want to see your lobby again, right? So for all those firms with the fancy artwork and all the beautiful furniture and all those things, you know, clients were happy not coming in, and we kind of helped them do that. Offices went remote overnight, and clients stopped wanting to see what we did. So they liked the remote. And this is a pretty dramatic slide here, that 67% of consumers expected lawyers, as we got deep into COVID, to have remote options. And in fact, it was the top choice for what firms they chose to come to, because if they didn't have remote options, they were probably going to ignore you and not come see you at all. This varied, of course, based on age group. I was a little surprised that millennials were a little bit less than Gen Xers, but Gen Xers said 72% of them wanted remote options. They don't want to come into our offices anymore. And there's boomers, of course. I'm proud that boomers are at 59%. I would have thought it'd be like 25%, but even boomers said, yeah, let's do remote access. That's how we're going to choose our lawyers. And that's the way we want to communicate from here on out. So there also was a big shift. And to the degree you think we had a shift, look what consumers did. Consumers in 2018, 23% wanted lawyers remotely. Now in 2021, now we're actually in 2022, right? In 2021, that jumped all the way to 79%. Those are big shifts from consumer expectations of the legal community. It does open a lot of doors for us, because think how much more work we can do when we're not disrupting people's lives to come in to our offices all the time. I've told this story over and over again to people, but if you think a minute about practices and people with busy lives, I mean, the idea that if you want to come see your lawyer, you take time off work and or get daycare for your kids, you then commute in from your house to a lawyer's office. You do the commute, then you have to find parking. Maybe you pay for parking. Then you come into the lawyer's office, and then you sit in the lobby for 10, 15 minutes, who knows? Then finally you get a chance to talk to your lawyer. You talk for 10, 15 minutes, and then you repeat the process back again, and you've lost 2 hours of your day. Versus hanging out in your boxer shorts on your couch with a t-shirt on, talking to your lawyer for 5 minutes by Zoom, right? I mean, the efficiency and the effectiveness of putting services where they're needed and providing legal access where it's needed is significant here as we look into COVID. And it's opened the door for us to do this by changing the culture of people who use us and rely on us so that we can provide legal services and legal access where we've never been able to provide it, and in a way we've never been able to provide it before. So improved business practices. This really is just about systems. Systems are the key to growth. Some would say that systems are just about the most important thing we can have as lawyers to be able to provide services more efficiently, more effectively, and cheaper to those people who need them. Working on your business is about building systems, period. And I'll tell you, I want to underscore that, because I think the only thing more important than systems in practice of law is perhaps culture. Those two things drive us to be able to improve how we provide services and who we provide services to. So I'm just going to talk about tech for just a moment, and I'll rush through this because I don't think your board is focused on tech. Maybe the issue is, what tools can we adapt that help our members get services into those who need us? And technology is certainly a piece of that, but I think the granularity is not necessary here. So here's a comparison of those who use some of these tools today and the successes they have, and those that are increasingly using technology to improve. You can see the revenue that firms bring in. The more they increase technology, the more revenue that they bring in. And lawyers are catching on. We're not those late adopters anymore who say, yeah, we don't need that. We do it the old-fashioned way, like my grandfather used to in his firm. Now we're learning, and everybody is jumping on board. Cloud storage, sure, 96% of us say we're going to use it. E-signatures and e-documents, sure, 95%. We're on this. We are building our firm to get there. Electronic payments, let's do it. All in the 90s, video conferencing, 83%. Let's use Zoom, let's do this. I mean, I love that our ability to serve those around us is getting easier and we're getting more adaptive to all of it. And it shows that it pays off too. I mean, this is the best of all worlds, right? Use more technology, help more people, make more money, decrease costs. And I think that's a goal for all of us in this access to justice movement. And here's a pretty good example of just that. Many people, many firms started to retool to give consumers what they wanted in a way that they wanted it. So now, as we've kind of made the shift through COVID to where we are today, most successful firms are now using data metrics. Data metrics used to mean, did I make money or lose money at the end of my income tax statement when you turned it into the IRS? That was your data metric. Today, those data metrics are much, much broader. And we've noted a number of things. One is technology-enabled firms are winning by adapting client expectations. It's a way to make money and serve more people. Here's another one. Let me add one more point to all of this before I get to this slide. In the legal trends report from Clio, who surveyed several thousand of both consumers and law firms, they concluded there was a, quote, striking difference between well-performing firms and others as a result of the use of their firm reporting tools, right? So 95% of all attorneys said they plan to continue to use technology that they've adopted during the pandemic and continue to grow it, which includes case management software, client portals, conference platforms, cloud storage, electronic billing, virtual document signatures, and 84% said that they wanted to grow these areas and put more money there than anywhere else in the next few years. The result has been that there's been a 6% growth. Yes, I said it, in the legal community, we had growth, 6% growth year over year, and a 40% increase in revenue per lawyer coming through 2021 as a result of changes in technology and use of data metrics to measure successes. So the takeaways are that we as firms are winning, we as legal profession are winning, consumers that use us are winning because they're getting the tools that we have. They're getting services the way they need it. We're becoming more consumer-centric and less lawyer-centric, and we're shifting the way we provide services to the way consumers want it and need it to meet their expectations. Okay, now we're to rent. Some of you on this call are more sensitive to rent than others. We saw some really interesting things that client expectations are really driving incremental investments into remote experiences and away from office spaces. And I'll give you a couple of stats that are a little bit shocking. Of the top 10 priorities of law firms that where you're going to put your money this year, right there at the very bottom, office space. Lawyers are not going to invest into office space. The very first priority for lawyers, practice management software. It says a lot. How many firms used to put the money into their real estate and into their offices and tried to expand or have an office in every county? It's a dead and dying culture, and virtual law firms and the ability to access people anywhere that they are, including their couches, is taking over. And that's something that's happening globally. Law office vacancies or office vacancies rose dramatically during the pandemic. Rents in the United States have fallen from 6.5% in 2021 to 2.3% in 2022. Rents are coming down. Office space vacancies are dramatically increasing. The length of a lease has dropped this year to a 5-year low in the United States, and that includes legal offices. But wait, there's more. I want to give you a couple quick takeaways from this. COVID has changed us, and it's changed us for the better. And here's a couple examples of areas of practices that have grown dramatically during COVID because of COVID: bankruptcy, criminal defense, intellectual property, labor and employment, litigation, even where we didn't have courts, right? We still had litigation growing, at least the pressure for litigation growing. Commercial and residential real estate and trust and estate work were the top 7 growth niches in our legal profession. So let's talk a little bit about some of the silver linings here. Employment. It's funny, I listened to the news this morning, and they mentioned that employment rates, are we in a recession or are we not in a recession? Pretty clear we're not in a recession for a number of reasons. One of which is there are two jobs available for every person seeking them. We have a far greater need for jobs, people to take the jobs, than there are people able to take the jobs right now. We're feeling it the most in professions, and particularly in the legal profession. So look at this. In January of this year, there was 1,126,600 jobs in legal. That was the highest number we'd ever seen. But then employment went up. We hired another 13,600 people in January of 2022. That is above and beyond the highest record of employment we've ever had in legal in the history of legal. So that puts us somewhere around 1.2 million people in legal. But not a surprise, there's a huge lawyer shortage. We've been seeing this coming as boomers have been retiring and the gray tsunami washes over our profession. Lawyers are exiting the profession. Law schools are not repopulating. There's a huge lack of lawyers, which in an access to justice world where we need to provide greater services, it's pretty clear lawyers are not alone the answer to providing services. And Lord knows, pro bono services alone will never get us there as the gap continues to grow. It is clear, I think, from the statistics that we're seeing that the only way we're going to grow into bridging the access to justice gap is to expand beyond reliance on lawyers and face-to-face, one-to-one representation. I can talk about that for a long time. I'm not going to talk about it much here. Maybe I'll come back and touch on it if you want to hear more about it. Revenue was up in this last year in 2021, 11 to 16% for large firms, 4% for smaller firms. Global mergers were up 143%. Law firms are consolidating rapidly. We went from $3.5 trillion in mergers to, ready for this, $5 trillion globally in law firm mergers. Good news, lawyers are no longer late adapters. We are now running with the tide that is being lifted by all industries. Lawyers are grasping on technology and using it because they see it as a way to increase revenue, to get more clients, to provide more services, to improve quality of services. We are more flexible for serving our clients now than ever. We've become client-centric as a profession, or at least more than we ever were, and not nearly as lawyer-centric. What's best for us? How do we think we should provide services? We're listening and adapting, like Netflix or Uber or Amazon. We're getting smarter and faster at providing legal services. Our ability to serve our clients is shifting as a result of technology and virtual services. And happily, we're getting more and a better work-life balance. With the change of people working from home, they can go exercise, they can be with their kids, they can share time with their spouse. It's opened up a lot of doors for people to work happier, yet productive, save the commute, get paid the same, maybe even move way out of town to somewhere much cheaper so their cost of living decreases, yet they still get the same firm incomes. A lot of ways that life has improved in COVID, despite so many people complaining about this or that. There's some big trends that are happening to make things better. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts, which is this. COVID has been our change agent, and despite all of the pain and death and sorrow that we have had to go through, there has been some significant silver linings. Law will continue to evolve, will continue to change, we're continuing to be more adaptive, we're continuing to better service those who need us and better serve people in the way that they do need us. Our court systems are finally changing. There are such huge shifts going on in the court systems with virtual dockets, with technology and Zoom coming in with virtual trials, we're getting in a place where we can better serve our people in the courts. Legal education continues to change to provide lawyers who are better prepared for this legal economy and not yesterday's legal economy. Our rules are changing. We have states like Arizona and Utah, soon to be Michigan, Florida, California, Minnesota, New Mexico. These are firms that are making dramatic changes in the rules of ethics, so that because they're recognizing that our rules of ethics really aren't about ethics, they're about economics, and that they are in many ways walls that stop us from serving our clients better. And we can take down some of those walls and expand our ability to serve, that we actually do begin to bridge the access to justice gap. And that is something that is happening in large part because of COVID and the options and opportunities that have opened up. We've changed the way we're running our law firms, the way we talk to our clients. We're starting to change our office culture so we can work out of the office, have better work-life balance, find communication in new ways, and be just as effective and even more efficient than we ever have been before. I mentioned this earlier, we're changing from being lawyer-centric to consumer-centric. So while all of my predictions of the 10 weren't spot on, and some move faster than others, I'm certain that change will continue to happen to us as we keep finding better reasons to adopt and to shift into this new economy, to improve the way we have relationships with our employees, and to build and grow their jobs in new and different ways, and continue to improve our services to make them more cost efficient, to make them cheaper, to provide them to people the way that they need them. And at the end of the day, both our consumers, our clients, the citizens of this state and country, our employees, and those around us will thank us for turning into a more progressive, smarter, efficient profession. And we, with this vision, I think will continue to lead and solve some of the access to justice problems that are out there. So with that, I'll conclude, and I thank you for your time. And I want to put in one plug. The Campaign for Legal Justice has law and beer events throughout the state this month and next month. For those of you in Tacoma, I'm hosting one at my house this Wednesday. It's a wine and justice. We're raising money for the campaign. I would love to see you there. Deborah Stevens is our keynote speaker. Of course, it's free. Come to donate. Come to drink wine. My winery is presenting the wine for the evening, and it should be fun. All right. Francis, thank you for the time, and I thank all of you. Happy to take questions or thoughts from any and all.
Thank you, Patrick. I would suggest that you provide your email in chat so that people can also that have some follow-up can do that. Thank you so much. We love you, Patrick, for what you do, what you mean to us in this state, and you're champion. You are a champion for justice, and you're always there raising fund for access to justice and talking about technology and issues. I wonder if Terry has some questions for you on tech. He's our tech chair. Terry, any question for Patrick before we?
Oh, Francis, you know I do. So I've already emailed Patrick, so thank you very much for this presentation. And I do agree with you. We do not spend a lot of time thinking about or worrying about law firms and their technology. We do spend a lot of time on two other areas of technological concern, and that is self-represented litigants having access to e-filing, digital signatures. I think the courts are still very focused on their law firm consumers and not their self-represented consumers. And then, as you said, to fill that access to justice gap, it's not going to be filled by lawyers. And the Practice of Law Board, as you probably know, is presenting their, sometime soon, presenting their regulatory lab to the Supreme Court to make some decisions about how we're going to regulate online legal algorithms. But what I do want to point out, as if you were going to do a follow-up to this article, because we're starting to talk about tech for the 2023 Access to Justice Conference, the issue that comes up now is hybrid. You're talking about in the office, online. what we're hearing a lot is people want to be able, some people want to be in person, some people want that convenience. And how, I'm curious if you have thoughts about how are we going to bridge the hybrid gap? Because that seems to be the next.
Well, there's two pieces of that, and I'll give you a short answer. One piece is technology, how, and the other question is really a matter of culture. As lawyers, we are trained and brought up to represent people one-on-one, face-to-face, you and me. That's the way we do it, cradle to grave. We're the Cadillac of legal services. And the reality is that that no longer serves the economic model that people need in this country for lawyers. It's a one-to-many system. Imagine if you had to sit down at the Amazon distribution center and tell a representative at their desk after you made an appointment that you wanted to order something from Amazon and have them deliver it to you in a week. It doesn't work. The one-to-many system is a culture shift for lawyers where we get used to representing many people, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes it's just online forums and pleadings and explaining processes. In my office, we have a chat bot that walks people for free through entire legal processes and produces letters and forms and pleadings for them for free. That's the one-to-many model. So it's a culture shift for lawyers to give up the reins to think that everything has to be done cradle to grave from beginning to end, and that we control every piece of that process face to face. That's a model that can never serve this now 92% justice gap that is affecting the lower income, and now 80% unmet legal need for those in the middle class and below, right? We're only serving 20% of this country. So it's a culture shift for us, met with technology solutions that allow us to do that. And I think that hybrid model is really about change of mindset when they see opportunities like I've showed you to make more money, serve more people, improve their firms, the culture, and then the technology to do it. I would also say this, if you're having a presentation at this conference, I just spent 4 days at a national conference with a small group of think tank members, and the amount of entrepreneurial ideas and concepts that are coming out of Arizona and Utah right now are mind-boggling. They're lawyers like all of us who've come up with brilliant solutions to be entrepreneurs to solve our problems. And having an opportunity to highlight some of these really innovative new companies that any of us and all of us could duplicate here in Washington, particularly if we have our own sandbox in which to do it in, I think would be a really nice bridge for you, for those people who see hybrid as an option, entrepreneurship as a solution, and technology as the mechanism or the flywheel that drives all of it.
Thank you. Any other question for Patrick? Jim, did you wanted to ask Patrick any question, Jim?
I didn't, but now that you offered me the opportunity, Francis, I mean, beware. I did want to note, and of course, thank Patrick, long time no see. I did want to note that I believe it was 2 weeks ago this last Friday, or 2 weeks ago today, the Seattle Times had a very lengthy article on the emerging work needs and relationships. And they quoted substantially from years of research and reporting that Microsoft has been doing, tracking all sorts of data metrics related to different configurations, work at home, work at work, hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. And the findings relative to productivity, work-life balance, and efficiency were not necessarily consistent with what Patrick was sharing in terms of those three areas. In fact, work-life balance was substantially harmed by remote work. Productivity was substantially harmed because you couldn't have essentially the water cooler kind of conversations that early identified and problem solved cases and matters, et cetera. So I think that it's really useful to look at that kind of data to figure things out. There's great efficiency that technology brings to the table, but it isn't necessarily demonstrating that there's just real clear questions about how effective it is in achieving some of our goals about effectiveness, access, and operational efficiency. It's not a binary relationship. It's just, there's just substantial, very high quality research being done on it.
All right. Patrick, did you want to comment, or is that okay?
I'll just say this, there is a huge amount of data that is coming out and will be coming out soon, both collected by the ABA and by the ABA Center for Innovation, which I'm the vice chair of, that's going to shed more light on this as we progress, both about how the legal profession is performing, where we're finding efficiencies, yes, where happiness is being cultivated and how. And I think we're going to have a lot of really good data that's coming out of COVID that we can share, that's lawyer specific, legal profession directed, and then of course the stuff that goes for the larger economy, but I'm most interested in lawyers. So we'll have a lot more information very soon.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. Now we move to presentation of partner report. Council of Public Defense is here today to present. I see Jonathan is here, as well as my good friend. Yes, Travis, I was looking for you. All right, Jonathan, go ahead. Introduce the rest of the team. And I see, yes, go ahead. Jason, yes, I was looking for Jason. All right. Jonathan, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now.
Okay, cool. So your good friends, Travis Stearns and Jason Schwartz are here. And my name is Jonathan Namamukor. I am a staff attorney with Columbia Legal Services. And let me see if I can share. Can I get the ability to share my screen? If not, I can go without the presentation as well. I can speak on it.
You should be able to see it now.
Okay, so you have to forgive me because my camera, the rest of y'all are on this screen, but my camera's on this main screen, so I'm going to be focusing on the main screen. And today we'll be talking on the Council of Public Defense, on public defense and what we've been up to for the past year. As I mentioned before, my name is Jonathan Namamukor. This is a photo of me when I was much younger and handsomer, but my background is I was a public defender in King County for almost 5 years. Prior to that, I was, upon completing law school, I was an attorney with a nonprofit based in London that represented people in Guantanamo Bay. After doing that for about a year, I realized that so many of the things that drove me to wanting to work in international human rights, wanted to advocate for people that were getting unfair sentences, those same things were happening back home with the people that looked just like me. And so I moved to Montgomery, Alabama, worked on appellate cases for 2 years before becoming a public defender. And in many ways, the goals of the council for the past year has been to prevent stories like my own, because although I love my time as a public defender, I eventually left after 4.5 years. And so the 3 things that we've been focusing on this year has been retention. How do we retain attorneys that are promising and that want to do this work and are passionate about this work? Recruitment, how do we recruit attorneys to public defense throughout the state of Washington, and also education. What important tools should we be giving attorneys as they practice law throughout Washington state? And the first slide that I want to talk about is retention. And it's not just about caseloads, but that's a big part of it. Throughout the course of this past year, we have spent a lot of time discussing what is the appropriate amount of cases that an attorney should be handling over the course of a given year for them to still be effective at their job and also serve their community at large. And we've had numerous conversations, numerous presentations that are trying to get to the heart of that matter. Because honestly, public defenders, not just throughout this country, but throughout the state of Washington, for the most part, are overworked. That was one of the reasons that I ended up leaving, because I could not balance being both a good attorney as well as being a good husband, father, partner, son. And that's been something that's been on my mind, and I think it's been on the council's mind, as far as how do we address this issue of attorneys feeling or being overworked and overwhelmed. And one thing that can alleviate that, and this is something I'll get into, is retaining and recruiting more social workers, investigators, administrators, support staff, who make a public defense office operate more efficiently and more effectively. The other thing is recruitment, and it's not just about recruiting folks to the big counties like King County, where I work, Snohomish County, Pierce County, but the rural counties as well, in order to have the entire state have a more equitable justice system. One thing that we focused on is how do we get people into counties that are not as populated, but also need attorneys, as well as the other positions that are affiliated with public defender offices. What does it mean to have a fully supported office? And this is what I mentioned before, as far as recruiting more social workers, recruiting more administrative staff, recruiting more investigators. That way, the entire system can be in a better position to support the counties and their communities. And probably the most of the time that we've spent on the council thus far has been on looking at the way that we can educate attorneys better in the line of both gender and racial equity. And so we've had numerous presentations that discuss what role that gender plays in the criminal justice system, as well as what role does race play, and how we have attorneys that are more cognizant and not necessarily sensitive, but are thinking about the role that race plays in everyday criminal justice practice. And to that end, we've pushed for more radical CLEs that address these blind spots. And another thing that we've discussed over the course of the past year is ways to bridge both the civil and the criminal world together. And I think one way that really highlights that, one case that really highlights that is the Blake case. It's, in its wake, it's been highlighted the ways that there's opportunities to collaborate that address the collateral consequences that a vacation of a Blake conviction can bring about. So whether it's getting people access to their legal financial obligations that they've paid, as well as helping people try to navigate the housing system now that a conviction has been overturned. These are all things and areas that we've discussed over the past year. And I'm going to turn to both Travis and Jason to see if there's anything that I've forgotten that we have focused on this past year that y'all would like to share.
Jonathan, I think that I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold right now, but I think Jonathan said pretty much everything. We have to recognize that we have a couple of different crises. There's the one crisis that Francis and I deal with in large cities that are funded and those that are not funded. Some of you may know that Stoughton County, for example, was hiring lawyers that were not even admitted in our state. And that the Court of Appeals, at least, we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to say about that, but the Court of Appeals said that was fine. And when we can't find lawyers that are actually admitted in our state to represent our clients, it's horrifying to me. But even in counties like, as Jonathan was saying, and I do appellate work, so I'm also a failed trial lawyer because I couldn't handle the caseloads either. We see a turnover. Jonathan's turnover is very typical. We see a mad rush out in the first 3 years, and then the majority of lawyers are no longer practicing public defense after 5 to 7 years, and that is a problem that we have to continue to address. But yeah, Jonathan, thank you for everything that you had to say.
Jason, any input?
No, that's great. I really appreciate Jonathan and Travis's comments. We're happy to answer any questions or engage in further conversation if you all have questions or comments.
All right, thank you so much, CPD. Any questions and comment for Council for Public Defense team that are here today? Oh, Sal, go ahead, Sal.
So I've got a question for all three of you on the caseloads, because I've heard that from a few public defenders I know, and it's for us civil trial lawyers, it's just amazing about the stress that you all are under because of the huge caseloads. I remember when I was on the Board of Governors back in the early 2000s, we actually passed limits, ethical limits, but apparently those are not working on the number of cases, felony cases or misdemeanor cases. So my question is, anything being done? Is anybody taking the lead and saying these aren't working for the reasons you've all just described, and they need to be revised? That's my question.
Jonathan?
Yes, we have had a number of, we're working through a statement that we're planning to submit to the Washington Supreme Court, highlighting just that. And there is a national effort to address caseload as well. I think right now the limit in the state of Washington is 150 for felony attorneys, and that number is a bit misleading because it's 150 over the course of a year, but at any given moment, any particular case can take you 40 to 50 to 60 hours of your time, especially if you're going to trial in a given week. And so even if that number 150 seems like it's one that people can attain, it doesn't really account for the actual amount of time that someone's putting in. And even if it's what many would consider a relatively simple case, with the amount of evidence that is gathered in 2022, as far as video evidence that attorneys have to review for something like a traffic stop, that there could be 15 to 30 to 40 hours of video per cop that an attorney is expected to review, in addition to interviewing and investigating all the other ancillary things that folks have to get down to. That 150 cases doesn't necessarily address the temporal aspect of the temporal requirements of the position.
You know, Sal, the numbers that we also supported were created in the 70s at a time when what the vision of what a public defender was supposed to be was very different. And I believe that the American Bar Association is going to come out with revised numbers now. There are revised numbers all over the country. They've done a lot of studies really demonstrating that our caseloads may be twice as high as they ought to be, just when you do a per hour investigation of how much public defenders under stress spend on their cases, and not how much public defenders ought to spend in reality. One of the really interesting things is that for my office, which is an appellate office, our caseloads dipped during the COVID crisis, but the number of hours that our attorneys spent did not. So even though we saw, a third of a caseload drop for a period of time, there was not a single lawyer in my office that worked less hours. And I think that that's just such a remarkable example of how overworked we are. And our caseload number is 36 a year, which is 12 higher than the NLADA recommended standard for appellate work. So we've done some work on time studies to reduce those numbers, but it's still too high. And I think that what COVID taught us about appellate work, at least, where a caseload could be dropped, is that we have way too many cases.
All right, thank you, Michelle. And then Travis, could you try to look into the chat and see if Vanna has a question there? Michelle, go ahead.
Thanks, Francis, and thank you for the presentation. I did have a question. It looks like the focus has been, understandably, is on criminal work, and I'm wondering if CPD has involvement with some of the folks that are doing kind of civil defense work, like parents, where that's been happening historically. And not to hide the ball, I know that there have been one-off conversations or smaller conversations, but Washington is in the midst of, we're in the first year of rolling out statewide right to counsel for tenants who are facing evictions. And I recognize that CPD just would, even though the laws and the rules that they're going to apply to the different programs aren't analogous, it's going to be something where there's a wealth of information and experience where we could possibly work together.
I as the ATJ, I guess, member of the board, I would love to connect with you either after this conversation so that I can learn more, because I am the civil representative, one of the civil representatives, so I would love to make that bridge for collaboration.
All right.
Yeah, and Michelle, we do, within public defense, anywhere where there's the constitutional right to counsel. So that includes civil commitments and termination, parents in termination cases and dependency cases as well. So we actually have caseload numbers for those, and we have a good sense of our workload. We actually have a case number for dependencies and not a number, which is actually quite nice. So it's an open caseload as opposed to a total, and I think it works quite well for those cases.
Okay, Jason, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was actually going to answer the question in the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
And the question in the chat for those who can't see it was, is there going to be any relief for individuals who are charged with manufacturing and not just possession charges for the state, for the Blake versus state case? I think the answer under state versus Blake is no. There's not going to be any relief under that case. There'd have to be some sort of future litigation to provide those folks relief. The only potential relief for those folks is if they had a prior conviction to a drug offense prior to getting those delivery offenses, and it changes their offender score. But that's really about it. That's pretty technical. I see Jim's got a question if there is.
Go ahead, Jim. You're on mute.
Yeah, got it. I just want to address caseload standards because, of course, we are the parallel program or analog program to the parents rep program in the child welfare system. And we currently have caseload standards. They are in the process of being updated pursuant to legislative direction. That will be done by the Supreme Court's Commission on Children in Foster Care sometime early fall. I think we're close to new standards.
All right. Any other question or comment for CPD? All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Travis, and Jason. We appreciate you guys. But I want you to hang on tight because the next issue on this agenda is how we can work together better. If you don't have any other appointment, I would love for you to stay a few minutes and listen to what Paige and Prachi are trying to do, because we need to break the barriers between civil and criminal. This is something that the ATJ board has been focused on since I've been on the board. It's almost 6 years now, and we are finally getting some movement on this. But if you are not able to stay, that's okay. We'll send you the report. All right, so let me invite Paige and Prachi to present the ATJ Board Delivery System Committee's Civil Criminal DiSiloing Workgroup report. Thank you. They and she are here. There you go. Take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Francis. I will introduce myself, and then Paige, if you want to go ahead and do that as well, and then we can get started on kind of what we're planning on doing is giving you kind of an overview of the work so far and the next steps that we are planning on engaging in. And of course, if there's no time on this call, if you want to follow up with any questions, more than happy to answer those. So my name is Prachi Davia. I think I know many of you on this call, but I am the Policy and Advocacy Director at the Public Defender Association.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Hardy. I use they, them pronouns, and I am an equity and leadership facilitator with Just Lead Washington.
So I'll give you a brief overview, and then Paige will go kind of over the next steps, an overview of the report that I think you all should have received a short while ago, but if not, I'm more than happy to circulate it so that you have it to review in more detail. I think, as Francis pointed out, this work started with us, at least within DISCO, more than a year ago at this point in time. And really, just building on the prior work that has been done in the state of Washington, in recognition that the civil and criminal legal kind of delivery systems are very, very siloed from one another. And, you know, many of the conversations that have been had so far, and I think some of the conversations during this meeting itself kind of resonates with kind of maybe what I'm about to say, which is that, you know, these silos are probably based on the fact that a lot of kind of the delivery of legal aid in whichever context has built largely around kind of the attorneys and potentially their practices and their preferences, whereas like clients oftentimes, many times, have both needs, and you know that of course is concerning because you know clients have many burdens to access kind of the various delivery systems. And you know, we on our end as kind of the advocates really should be working towards, you know, bringing those barriers down, right? Because those barriers really do function as access to justice issues, and they have kind of reverberating effects, right? So of course they have impacts on the clients themselves, but also their broader, you know, their families, their communities, you know, and certainly on us all as part of those communities as well. And so, you know, what we started out by doing is just, you know, of course, engaging in that initial kind of understanding and reflection, and, you know, kind of as a given that, you know, there is an issue here around siloed systems, and what we need to do is both analyze and see what has happened in the past, but also think about, okay, fine, how do we really mobilize next steps? So what we did, just to kind of go through a little bit around kind of our methodology, I guess, is that we kind of went back through, you know, all of the work that has been done in Washington. And this includes the work of, you know, NJP, it includes the work of CLS, it includes the work of Clean Child, it includes the work of individual advocates who have kind of been having these conversations and been trying to bridge, you know, the legal divide here. And so we pulled those conversations together, as well as, you know, a separate report that was also conducted by Just Lead, which really focused on community-based conversations with people who are in the community, and really try to understand from them, you know, what the real impacts, of course, the harmful impacts of siloed legal systems. So we pulled all of that together, as well as looking at different models, both, as I said, in Washington, but across the country as well, where, you know, where everywhere people have recognized that, you know, there are, you know, holistic ways of approaching the ways in which we provide, you know, legal aid to people. And, you know, there are many models out there in the country as well. And so really looking at those, you know, we pulled all of that information together, and we did formulate some next steps, but, you know, really want to emphasize the fact that any of the next steps are, you know, they are somewhat fuzzy only because, and they have fuzzy edges only because really what we want them to be is informed by community outreach, right? Like that is our main next steps, is to engage in intensive community outreach. And it will be that outreach that really informs the next steps that we have. So we did identify, you know, things like a summit, you know, having a pilot project in one particular location, having a simulation that is trauma informed, you know, but again, those are next steps that we have identified. We really want to have this moving forward led by community outreach. One of the things that I want to say before I turn this over to Paige as well is that, you know, I very much appreciate so many people on this call have been working on this for such a long time, have not only done that, but have also supported this particular conversation and this work. And so really thank you to you all. And also the funding that you had approved is really going to be going towards that community-based outreach work in order to inform the next steps. So really appreciate you all moving forward to provide those resources for the next steps. And we have engaged in next steps since we provided that report to you last. And maybe Paige, you can take it over from here to kind of go over those with the board.
Yeah, happy to kind of share some pieces. Just kind of go off of what Prachi was sharing. I think the way that this subcommittee kind of started, and I kind of came in several months after the subcommittee started, but I think that there was very much a recognition within the group that the way that we've been doing this work has to fundamentally shift if we're talking about shifting power back to communities and thinking about ways that we can incorporate like community lawyering and like movement lawyering practices in the ways that we're working through this. And how do we center those that are most impacted by these DiSilos, because they're the ones that are being most harmed? And how does our approach encompass both an individual short-term like harm mitigation strategy, as well as thinking through how can we do transformative changes to the systems that are actively causing harm in our devastating communities? And so our approach is really, how do we center those that are most impacted, recognizing, right, that these communities are not monolithic, and the solutions that communities want and need are going to be different and diverse, but how do we create spaces to hear what the needs and desires and strategies are from communities, and really want to intentionally make space to build meaningful relationships, not just with community service organizations, which I think a lot of that we're used to and comfortable building those types of relationships, but how are we also building intentional relationships with folks that are presently incarcerated, people that are formerly incarcerated, as well as like family and community members that support loved ones on the inside, and who are also experiencing the devastating consequences of like the housing crisis and all the things that are compounding and causing harm. How can we kind of hear all those voices and perspectives to be able to kind of reach some sort of solution that is really oriented and based in community desire? And so that's kind of what our thought process has been about this process. As Prachi was sharing, kind of we as a group have collectively brainstormed a bunch of different ideas, but before we kind of move in any specific direction, we do want to do that intentional relationship building. I think the most important updates to share is that we were provided an opportunity to apply for some funding recently through you all at the ATJ board to kind of help give some shape and to kind of help support this project. Part of what we're thinking is that, and I'm sure many of you all experience this, is that, you know, this is work that is super important, but it's, for many of us, is often part of like our volunteer work, that we're doing this in addition to the work. And in order for this to be impactful, there has to be people that are willing to bottom line it and really be able to invest in these relationships so that they're actually, so they're not transactional, so that we're not just like exploiting people's ideas and experiences, but really building intentional relationships that we can kind of co-create solutions together. And so some of the ideas we're thinking around is like, how can we, one, for example, pay folks for their lived expertise around this to make sure that folks that are sharing their ideas are being compensated for their brilliance? How do we find people to kind of bottom line this project, whether that's connecting with a organization that might be able to hire someone who has kind of like community organizing experience to help us be able to make sure that we have folks in place to support this work on a long-term effort. And so those are some of the ideas now that we're coming from. Most recently, we reached out to and had kind of like a mini conversation and presentation with the community advisory panel, CAP, and intend to continue to build relationships with them and want to kind of explore other relationships. I think where we are kind of now is, as a subcommittee, is we need to kind of come together now that we have received the funds from you all to figure out like how can we use them in a most impactful way, and making sure that we're kind of aligning with our priorities and strategies. I think that and we're happy to kind of share out the approach, but kind of how we had thought about it intentionally was to do like a multi-phase, multi-year model, with the first phase being within like a 6-month to 1 year kind of period where we're doing the relationship building and sharing. And then from those conversations, from those relationships moved kind of towards to phase 2, where we would try to have something more, whether it's something like a summit of sorts or some sort of kind of event or type of catalyst to kind of move to the next phase. But again, it's not, I don't want it to seem like we're being overly kind of like wishy-washy or like trying to hide the ball at all. It's just really that we really want to be intentional about making sure that the folks that are involved are helping to shape and inform what that next phase looks like. So that's kind of where we're at now. And I'm happy to kind of answer any questions. Again, we really just wanted to kind of resist the idea that lawyers have all the solutions and really kind of want to kind of take a pause and be intentional and kind of, how do we, recognize that there's an absolute sense of urgency because people are being harmed and impacted now, but how do we also make sure that we're creating the space intentionally for more ideas to be able to come, more creative solutions. So Prachi, I don't know if there's any pieces that you feel like I missed that I should add to. I'm happy to kind of shape some of that out a little bit more.
No, not missed. I guess the only thing that I will say is just based on the previous conversations during this meeting, feels like we could also have a lot of partners on the board itself who are kind of think about this work and doing this work. So would love to kind of connect outside of this meeting if that's something that you're interested in as well.
Okay, George Bradley has a question for you guys.
Hi, Prachi and Paige. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering, have you been working with Civil Survival, partnering with them at all? I'm wondering if they might be an organization that could house the kind of person you're thinking about.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Civil Survival is definitely on the list that we've started of like who are the initial people that we absolutely want to start building relationships with. So definitely we'll be reaching out to them, but have not made that initial first step yet. But yes, definitely, thank you. And would absolutely love to like crowdsource and hear other ideas of who we need to be in connection with and in relationship with. So definitely would welcome any of those.
Thank you, Vanna, and then Brain.
Hello, my name is Vanna Singh. And since we're already talking about this subject about collaborating with organizations that are already doing the work, such as the organization that I have founded in Tacoma. It's called Tacoma Healing Awareness Community. And so I'd just like to find out, since I already have an event coming up on the 30th this month, and Sal has, he knows what I'm doing. And so if you can see this, we're honoring and celebrating Black and Brown grassroots leaders from the east side of Tacoma 253. And being a grassroots organizer, I've been struggling so hard to find the funding for the event that I'm hosting. Is there a way that we can start now with what I'm doing to support this wonderful workshop? It's a Know Your Rights workshop. We're going to have Immigration 101, Street Law 101. We've already connected with, we've already connected with Northwest Immigration Rights Project, Department of Assigned Counsel, and a few other grassroots organizations that are going to be part of this event. It is going to be July 30th on the east side of Tacoma. And so we have a $50,000 budget, right? And so I'm even struggling to get $2,000 right now. And how can we be the change that you guys are talking about? How can you support this event that we're trying to empower the marginalized? And I represent the Southeast Asian community, Cambodian, Thai, and Laos, and we are systemically oppressed. And so I'm trying to show the people that you have rights, you have options, but because we're living in fear of deportation and the systemic oppression from the criminal justice system, people don't want to come out because they're afraid. And so we've been doing this event annually, every other year, but I just like to put that out. And yeah, I just wanted to share that, and I'm looking for support. Thank you.
Yeah, would you mind sharing your email address? I'd love to reach out to you and connect. Prachi and I would love to connect with you if you're comfortable sharing that.
Thank you, Paige. Breen, go ahead.
Paige and Prachi, thank you for your presentation. Paige, since you were kind of asking about ideas of other folks to reach out to, I'm wondering if you've considered reaching out to community health centers. At the state legislative level, they're working toward incentivizing jail to community care transitions by extending, Medicaid earlier, Medicaid benefits while folks are still incarcerated and extending those afterward. So I know a lot of community health centers are working on, especially in the mental health and substance use disorder space, there's more funding for it. So more of us are going to be getting involved with those care transitions. Also, separately, several CHCs in Washington State are starting to work with county volunteer legal organizations as well as NJP to develop these medical legal partnerships. And so we're serving as access points for attorneys. And then sort of my final question is, when you're reaching out to the county volunteer legal orgs, are you asking them which CBOs they are working with? Because that might be another entry point, as well as the community action agencies. I think a lot of times when folks are, released, a lot of times that's where they're immediately pointed to, because that's where WIC is administered and Head Start and all of these other programs. And so having those touch points and relationships would also be helpful, because a lot of times they're also in charge of the transitional housing hubs and HUD vouchers and such. So they often know who needs the help and at what, where they are in their, current life transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Brain. Okay, any other question or comment for Prachi and Paige? There's a lot going on in chats. I'm sure Prachi and Paige, you are monitoring that in case there are any questions for you guys there. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Paige and Prachi. Appreciate it. And we hope that every month we are able to get some updates if it's needed as the project goes on. Thank you so much. All right, next we move to Miria is going to present a liaison report from Bono, from Pro Bono Council. Miria, are you there? Yes.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to report that the Pro Bono Council is hosting a retreat for their members in August. And this will be an important time for the members to reestablish the Pro Bono Council priorities. And they will have a facilitated workshop on anti-burnout in order to prevent as much turnover as possible. I think I want to go to that retreat. Anyway, second, they recently hired Jesse Gwencha as program coordinator for the Pro Bono Council, and he will be covering the dementia legal planning project that they run that covers statewide, and it's helping with other Pro Bono Council work. I think that work on dementia, I mean, just light up, a bulb, I remember just working with my parents and stuff. So, our seniors need have a lot of needs. So dementia legal planning project, he'll be doing that as well. And finally, they're working along with the delivery systems committee to bring more emphasis on the value of lived experiences and their place within the Pro Bono Council and our legal aid system. So that's the.
Thank you, Miria. Any question or comment for Miria? All right. Because we don't have enough time, I've asked SP permission to push the MJC report, Minority and Justice Commission liaison report, to next month. And she has graciously permitted me to do that. So we can go to our coalition update now. Alexandra, could you give us the update from EJC? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex. I'm the new Communications and Advocacy Director for the EJC and LFW. I started about 6 weeks ago, and I've spent the last 6 weeks really learning about our internal and external communications needs. And I've started having discussions around our upcoming public funding asks. So on the federal side, our update right now is that the EJC is planning to resume its ABA days next spring in DC. So I am currently working with Cesar to define our ask and kind of start organizing all that trip will require. On the state funding side, the EJC submitted our request to OCLA last month. So we're looking forward to meeting with the agency next week, and we'll learn more about how we can support OCLA's ask in the 2023 to 2024 biennium. And then lastly, on the King County side, so discussions around King County funding are underway. We had a preliminary meeting last week with our partners to develop an ask and talking points. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And if you have any questions or if you'd like to schedule a meeting with me, like I'd love to get to know all of you better. I'm excited to be working with you. So I'll put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out. So thank you.
Thank you. Vanna, you still have your hands up. Is it for a question for Alex? Okay. All right. Any question or comment for Alex? Okay. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Cesar is here with us. Thank you, Cesar, for making it. Any federal funding reports at this time?
No, nothing. Well, nothing significant to report in terms of developments, but the House has started to work on the budget. The budget session is underway. The budget process in Congress is underway. The President's budget has requested $700 million for LSC, which would be a pretty significant increase from the current funding level of the high 400s, and also higher than the request last session, which was $600 million. So that's all good on that front. And I think there's support in the House for that kind of funding, or approaching that kind of funding. By all estimates, LSC is, and I've heard me say this many times, you know, the corporation is asking for in excess of $1 billion, given the chronic and historic underfunding. The issues are difficult because of, you know, the instability in Congress and what's going to happen with the election. So it's a long way between now and the final budget. I have been working with Alex, and she actually just received some information. There was a dear colleague letter where more than 150 representatives signed a letter in support of the increase for LSC, including 30 Republicans in the House, and then there was a 52 signed in the Senate with 7 Republicans. Again, continuing that bipartisan support for LSC in Congress, or trying to maintain that support. But we'll see what happens. As the budget session develops, we'll provide more updates.
Thank you. Thank you, Cesar. Any question or comment for Cesar on federal funding reports? All right, over to you, Jim.
Well, thank you. And I will be brief. I've got 2 areas of updates. One is it's budget development season for us, as we've been reporting monthly. We have multiple initiatives that we will present to the legislature. We have to do significant caseload adjustments for our child rep program. We call it the 1219 program, referencing the House bill number that created the statewide right to counsel for children. We have to look very seriously, and we're working with our partners at the Office of Public Defense to come up with a rationale and methodology to do vendor rate adjustments for our contractors, who are currently being paid at about 60% of what the AG is paying for a fully loaded FTE, and what the state of Oregon is now paying for a fully loaded FTE. We have to seek new funding for the continued funding for our eviction defense program. It was funded on a 1-year only basis for FY23. We will be asking the legislature to continue that program moving forward. We may ask for a little bit more funding in that program, but that's still being considered. We have to do a supplemental and then an increase in funding for the eviction right to counsel program. Filings are now starting to trickle up. And in some of the urban areas, they are growing significantly. King County is leading the pack on that one. We get monthly data from AOC, and we compare that with our caseload data from our RTC providers, and that's being captured in legal service. And then we have a very large request, I anticipate. I'm still waiting for numbers, but we have to do a vendor rate adjustment for the basic legal aid program that flows through NJP. That will include both the NJP's internal costs, known, measurable, and predictable costs that they will incur above baseline this year. And we will also include the recommended amount that the Legal Foundation and the Pro Bono Council have jointly proposed to us for those programs that receive funding through the subcontract from NJP to the Legal Foundation and then through the Legal Foundation. We anticipate that just the sum total of those is going to be in excess of $25 million in new money for the biennium. We are not anticipating requesting a general increase in baseline legal aid funding. That said, and I'm looking forward to our conversation with the EJC next week, we would probably welcome others promoting an increase, a general increase in civil legal aid funding in the baseline number. Current initiatives, I'll just briefly update you on. We had multiple notices of funding availability out. We issued a notice of funding availability for dedicated domestic violence funding focused on enhancing services to people who need relief under the revised domestic violence and firearms surrender laws, House Bill 1320 and House Bill 1901. We ended up funding 4 programs or 4 proposals, but we anticipate that it will actually fund at some level 5 programs. Thurston County Volunteer Legal Services has an excellent proposal to serve enhanced services to domestic violence victims in 5 counties in the South Puget Sound region. Tacoma Pro Bono wants to build and target their partnerships and enhance capabilities in Pierce County. We've approved a proposal from the Spokane County YWCA to provide lethality prioritized focus in partnership with rural DV providing organizations in East and Northeastern Washington. And they will also be executing a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement with a small, relatively new buy-in for organization called Mujeres in Action and Manzanita House to represent immigrants in Spokane County. And then finally, we are going to fund Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project for substantially expanded services, principally focused in Eastern Washington, out of the Wenatchee office. And we are proposing and we'll be discussing next week, Wednesday, a subcontract arrangement between NIRP and Manzanita House, which provides immigration-related and civil legal assistance to victims, immigrant victims, and survivors of domestic violence. And then finally, we have approved and are in the process of contracting for eviction defense funding with 12 legal aid organizations across the state, most of whom have been prior recipients of eviction defense funding. And we are working with providers in King County to develop kind of a unified focus and approach to addressing the pre-right to counsel needs for tenants in that county. That's a work in progress, but we're really optimistic about that. So that's my report.
Thank you. I would encourage people to put any questions or comments in chats for Jim because of time. Caitlin, any LFW or campaign report?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. because I'm mindful of the time that has been set aside for this meeting. And before I do that, I just want to publicly thank OCLA for the commitment. You know, there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, in the upcoming session, but specifically for the commitment to to ask for an increase for the vendor adjustment. Typically that has just included NJP, but the expansion to include, you know, all programs doing state eligible work, you know, within the funding partnership is so much appreciated. And we're very grateful for that. So thank you, Jim. Things are super busy at LFW. We're the campaign for equal justice is going at full throttle. It's Beer and Justice season. If you haven't participated in one already, I hope you will. Thank you so much, Francis, for coming to Vancouver and being our keynote speaker. On Wednesday night, we had Seattle Beer and Justice in the Amazon Spheres, which was like practically an out-of-body experience, man. If you've never been there, it's crazy. Doug Baldwin and Tom Vertitas and other longtime supporters of civil legal aid helped kick us off. And anyway, last night we were in Bellingham, and then next week is Tacoma. We'll take a little break before we head over to Eastern Washington at the end of the summer. The interest on lawyer trust account program is doing very well in light of the latest increases to the federal funds target rate. We're still figuring out what that's going to mean, you know, for our partnership grants next year. But anyway, that's almost a real-time adjustment. I don't even have a number for you of how much, you know, what the increase is projected to be, other than we're just following it on a daily basis and have an internal strategy in place to make sure the banks are paying what they need to pay. Okay, I feel like I just did a blurt. If anyone has any questions or wants to know more about, you know, Legal Foundation, please, you know, email me or put it in the chat. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone, for attending this month meeting. We'll see you next month. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Francis.